When you reach a certain age, maybe it's 50, maybe 60, and you start to notice something quiet happening in your family life. It doesn't always come with a big event or a clear turning point. It's more like a shift in the air. The phone rings less. The conversations grow shorter. The invitations come slower. And when you're with them, something feels different. Not angry, not dramatic, just distant. Like there's a layer of glass between you and the people you love most. And it hurts. But you tell yourself not to take it personally. You say they're busy, that life is different now, that you're strong enough to handle a little silence. And yet, something inside you doesn't feel okay. This isn't just about being forgotten. It's about not recognizing who you've become inside that silence. You see, the human psyche, especially in the second half of life, begins to reveal truths we once had the energy to ignore. And when family bonds begin to stretch thin, those truths come forward like shadows. Jung wrote that what we repress doesn't disappear. It goes underground. It waits in the dark corners of our behavior, showing up in subtle ways, in our tone, in our distance, in our unmet expectations. And often, without realizing it, we start damaging the very connections we long to protect. That's the invisible weight. It's not one moment. It's not one word. It's the accumulation of things unsaid, needs unmet, and fears unacknowledged. And by the time we realize it's heavy, it's already shaping how we show up in our families. This is where it begins, not with blame, but with awareness. Because most of what drives disconnection after 50 isn't cruelty. It's unconscious behavior. Things we do without realizing it, patterns that were born from love, pain, duty, fear. And unless we bring them into the light, they start to cost us everything we value most. In this series, we're going to explore 7 hidden behaviors that slowly damage family bonds after 50. But before we list them, we need to pause and talk about why these patterns show up at all. Because you can't change what you don't understand. And the truth is, getting older doesn't just change your body. It transforms your psychology. Let's talk about that. 1. The shift from doing to being. When we're young, our relationships are built on activity, things to do, places to go, problems to solve. In families, you become the fixer, the provider, the guide. There's always something to manage. But after 50, something subtle happens. You stop being needed in the same way. Your kids grow up. Your partner becomes more independent. You retire or slow down. And without warning, your value feels unclear. So you do what makes sense. You try to help. You offer advice. You stay involved. You remind them of what worked in the past. You speak with experience, sometimes even authority. But often, it's not received the way you expect. They pull back. They disagree. They say you're too intense, too negative, too involved. And suddenly, without knowing why, you feel like a stranger in your own family. This is the trap many fall into. We think we're offering wisdom, but what we're really doing is fighting invisibility. You want to feel needed, not out of pride, but out of love. But if that need becomes desperate, it turns into pressure. And pressure makes people pull away. This is the first reason we need awareness, because without it, our efforts to stay close might actually push people further. 2. The accumulation of unspoken resentment. After 50, most people carry some form of emotional scar tissue. Not because they're bitter, but because they've lived long enough to be disappointed. You've probably kept the peace more times than you can count. Held your tongue when you wanted to speak. Given when you didn't have much left to give. And you did it because you love them. But every time you swallow a need, something small stores itself inside you. Every time you sacrifice without acknowledgement, it leaves a mark. And over time, this becomes resentment without a voice. Resentment doesn't always show up in big arguments. It shows up in the way your tone tightens, in the way you avoid certain calls, in the way you say, "I'm fine," when you're not. And your family feels it, even if they don't understand it. This is what Jung meant when he said the shadow isn't evil. It's just what's been denied. And resentment is one of the most common shadows in families. Not because people are ungrateful, but because we never learned how to express our pain in a way that builds bridges. So we suppress. We let it go. We keep smiling. Until we don't. 3. The collapse of old roles. One of the most disorienting parts of growing older is losing the roles that used to define you. You were the father, the mother, the provider, the one everyone relied on. But now, they have their own lives, their own homes, their own way of doing things, and you're not sure where you fit anymore. So you hold on tighter, or you pull away, or you fluctuate between both, unsure of what's wanted from you now. This uncertainty can turn into control, subtle, unspoken control. You remind them of how things used to be. You compare their choices to your sacrifices. You say things like, in my day, not to lecture, but to re-establish value. But instead of drawing them closer, it creates emotional distance. And that hurts, not because you want control, but because you want relevance. The truth is, your family still needs you. Just not in the same way. And that's where grief comes in. Because this stage of life isn't just about aging. It's about mourning who you were and learning to love who you're becoming. 4. The fear of emotional vulnerability. As we get older, we're supposed to be the strong ones, the wise ones, the grounded ones. But inside, we still get lonely, still get scared, still want someone to ask, how are you really? But we don't say it, because we think we shouldn't. So instead, we make jokes, or stay silent, or act like nothing bothers us. But your family can sense what you don't say. And sometimes the disconnection doesn't come from what you do wrong, but from what you never admit. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the doorway to closeness. And many times, your family doesn't need your advice. They need your honesty. They need to hear you say, I miss you. Or that hurt me. Or even, I'm struggling. That kind of openness can melt years of distance in seconds. 5. Why this chapter matters. You've lived a full life. You've done your best. You've carried weight that no one else will ever understand. But now, it's time to let some of it go. To stop performing. To stop pretending you're fine. To stop waiting for them to make the first move. Because the most powerful healing you can bring to your family now isn't more doing. It's being fully yourself. Without the mask. Without the anger. Without the silent expectation that they should understand. What you offer now is different. It's presence. It's insight. It's calm. But only if you let go of the invisible behaviors that hide behind love. In the next chapters, we'll name them. Each one by one, not to blame, but to bring light. So that the next time your family looks into your eyes, they see you, not your pain, not your defenses, not your resentment, but you. And so that you can see them, too. Chapter 2. The quiet ways we drift apart. It doesn't always happen with a fight. Sometimes families break apart in silence, through pauses that stretch too long, through glances that avoid each other, through words that never quite get said. No slammed doors. No dramatic goodbyes. Just a slow quieting. You still love them. They still love you. But somehow, it doesn't feel the same. And if you're honest, you don't always know why. You replay conversations. You second-guess a tone you used. You wonder if you're asking too much or giving too little. But maybe the real problem isn't one thing. Maybe it's the accumulation of small things left unspoken. These aren't loud behaviors. They're quiet ones. Often unconscious. Usually well-intentioned. But over time, they create emotional distance. They push loved ones just far enough away that closeness starts to feel like work. Let's talk about 4 of them. 1. Correcting instead of connecting. You're talking to your son or your daughter or your partner, and they say something that's not quite right. Maybe it's a memory you remember differently. Maybe it's an opinion you strongly disagree with. Maybe it's just a small detail that doesn't sit right. So you interrupt, kindly of course, and you correct them. It wasn't a Tuesday, it was a Thursday. No, you didn't tell me that. That's not really what happened. You think you're helping. You think you're keeping the truth in check. But what they hear is something else. They hear that your need to be right matters more than your desire to just listen. And slowly, over time, they stop sharing. Not because you hurt them, but because they don't feel safe enough to be fully themselves around you. Jung spoke often about the ego's attachment to being correct. How the ego defends itself by proving, by adjusting, by holding on to control. But relationships don't need control. They need presence. Try this instead. When someone shares something with you, listen without preparing your response. Let their truth exist beside your own. Ask yourself, is this a moment for correction or connection? 9 times out of 10, it's connection. And that one choice changes everything. 2. Leading with disappointment. You call your daughter. She picks up after the 4th ring. Before you say hello, your first words are, well, I was starting to think you forgot about me. She laughs awkwardly. You move on. But a small part of her feels guilt instead of warmth. This is what happens when you lead with disappointment. It doesn't matter how gentle your voice is, or how much love you feel underneath. What people remember is how you made them feel the moment they showed up. And if every encounter begins with a reminder of what they didn't do, rather than gratitude for what they did, they begin to associate your presence with pressure. You didn't mean to do that. You just wanted to feel important, to feel remembered, to feel like you matter. But instead of saying those things clearly, the shadow of disappointment speaks for you. And that shadow, left unchecked, builds walls. People don't avoid those who love them. They avoid those who make them feel like they're failing at loving you correctly. Try this. The next time someone finally calls, or shows up, or remembers, say this first. I'm so glad to hear your voice. Or, it means a lot that you called. Or simply, thank you. Let them feel welcomed, not measured. There's time for honesty later. But first, make space for closeness. 3. Holding on to old versions of people. You remember them when they were little. The way they laughed. The way they held your hand. The way they needed you. And part of you still speaks to that version of them. You give advice they didn't ask for. You warn them of things they already understand. You talk to them like they're still becoming, instead of acknowledging that they've already become. This is one of the hardest shifts in family, realizing that the people you once guided have grown beyond your guidance. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded. But letting go of those old versions? It's like grieving someone who's still alive. And sometimes when you cling to who they were, they start to feel unseen for who they are. They become frustrated, or distant, or short with you, and you wonder what happened. But the truth is simple. They're trying to be seen in the present, while you're still holding on to the past. Let go, not of your memories, not of your love, but of your need to define who they should be. Meet them where they are. Ask more questions than you give answers. Let their growth surprise you, instead of resisting it. That's how relationships evolve. That's how bonds deepen across years, not just in spite of them, but because of them. 4. Protecting peace by avoiding truth. You don't want to fight. You've lived long enough to know that some arguments go nowhere. So you keep the peace. You avoid the hard topics. You say you're fine when you're not. You laugh at jokes that sting. You've convinced yourself this is maturity. That silence is strength. But here's the truth. Sometimes the silence you keep is the distance they feel. You didn't yell. You didn't criticize. You didn't do anything wrong. But they still pull away. Because what you're calling peace is actually avoidance. Avoidance of truth. Avoidance of vulnerability. Avoidance of intimacy. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of honesty, gently spoken. Speak the thing you're afraid to say. Say, I miss you. Say, that hurt me. Say, I want us to be close again. It might shake things for a moment, but it will bring you back to the center, to the place where love lives, not in performance, but in truth. Closing reflection. None of these behaviors come from a bad place. They come from love, from fear, from history, from habit. But if left unexamined, they become barriers. Small, invisible ones, the kind that don't make noise, but quietly reshape the heart of a family. And if you're reading this and thinking, I do that sometimes, good. It means you're awake. It means you care. It means something in you is ready to shift. Change doesn't require shame. It requires attention, not to the others, to yourself. Because how you show up now, after 50, 60, 70, it still matters. It shapes the way your family remembers you, the way they carry you, even when you're not around. So choose softness. Choose patience. Choose the kind of presence that makes people feel safe again. That's how families heal. Not with big talks or long letters, but with everyday moments made sacred by your willingness to try. Chapter 3. How the past still speaks through you. There are things we carry that we don't even know we're carrying. Not in our hands, not on our backs, but deep inside, in the ways we speak, in the silences we keep, in the tension we bring into the room without ever saying a word. We don't plan it. We don't choose it. But somehow, the past keeps finding its way into the present. Especially in our families. After 50, after 60, we often imagine that we're over what hurt us. That we've moved on. That our maturity has given us a kind of immunity from the pain we once knew. But maturity doesn't erase pain. It only makes it quieter. And silence is not healing. Sometimes silence is memory's hiding place. What Jung understood deeply is that the unconscious doesn't forget. Even when you think you've outgrown something, a moment of rejection, a parent's disappointment, a childhood full of chaos or pressure, it still lives in you. Not as a story you retell, but as a pattern you replay. And the place where those patterns show up most? Your closest relationships. Let's talk about how the past still speaks through you, and how it might be shaping your family bonds today, without you even realizing it. You react stronger than the situation calls for. Your son makes a choice you don't agree with, something small. Your daughter forgets to call, again. Your partner forgets a detail you mentioned yesterday. And suddenly it hits you hard. Harder than it should. You feel ignored. You feel disrespected. You feel like they're telling you, without words, that you don't matter. But deep down, if you're honest, the feeling is older than this moment. It reminds you of something from years ago. Maybe even decades. A time when you felt invisible. A time when no one listened. A time when your efforts went unnoticed. What's happening is not just about them. It's about you meeting an old wound again. This is what the psyche does. It repeats what's unresolved, hoping for a new ending. But unless you see it for what it is, you'll keep reacting from a wound instead of from awareness. The next time you feel that surge of emotion, ask yourself, is this about now or about then? Because when you can name what's old, you can finally stop making the people in front of you responsible for healing what someone else broke. You try to be the parent you wish you had. Maybe your childhood was strict. Maybe it was chaotic. Maybe it was cold. So you decided early on, my kids will never feel that. I'll give them what I never got. And you did. You were more supportive, more present, more generous, more protective. But sometimes more becomes too much, because trying to fix your childhood through your children often turns into something else. Giving when they're not asking, helping when they're trying to grow, offering advice when they just need space, needing their approval without realizing it. In trying to heal the old pain, we may accidentally put pressure on our family to make us feel whole. But healing doesn't come from being the opposite of what hurt you. It comes from facing the wound itself. You can't rewrite your childhood through your children. You can only heal it by bringing compassion to the part of you that's still waiting to be seen. Your family doesn't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be real. Especially now. You avoid conflict because you fear rejection. Maybe you were raised in a house where conflict meant yelling, or shame, or silent treatments that lasted days. So you learned to survive by staying small, by staying agreeable, by staying silent. And now, even as an adult, you still carry that reflex. You let things go, even when they matter. You swallow disappointment, even when it builds. You smile through disrespect, even when it hurts. Because deep down, there's still a belief. If I speak up, they'll walk away. If I cause trouble, they'll stop loving me. But that's not love. That's survival. And love doesn't grow in silence. It grows in honesty. The past taught you to protect peace at any cost. But real peace doesn't come from walking on eggshells. It comes from standing in truth with an open heart. Speak the hard thing. Say the scary thing. Not to hurt them, but to free yourself. The ones who truly love you will lean in. The ones who don't were never close to begin with. You expect others to fix what you haven't faced. You feel hurt. They've pulled away. You feel unseen, forgotten, taken for granted. So you wait. You wait for the apology. You wait for them to come closer. You wait for them to realize what you feel without you saying it. But the more you wait, the more frustrated you become. And slowly, resentment begins to build. The truth? What you want isn't always fairness. Sometimes what you want is healing. And healing isn't something they owe you. It's something you give yourself. Yes, they may have hurt you. Yes, they may be distant now. But you are still responsible for the meaning you make out of the pain. You can keep blaming them. Or you can start asking yourself, what is this really waking up in me? Because that's the real work. And you don't need them to be someone else in order to do it. You just need the courage to stop waiting for them to return. And begin returning to yourself. The past doesn't disqualify you, it equips you. You've lived a lot of life. You've seen the patterns. You've felt the ache. And maybe you've made mistakes along the way. We all do. But here's the beautiful truth. You're not too late. You're not too damaged. And your history doesn't disqualify you from love. It prepares you for it. Because when you bring awareness to your story, when you stop hiding the pain, and start listening to what it's trying to teach, you become a source of wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom that lectures. The kind that listens. That softens. That sees. When you stop letting your past control you, you stop controlling others. And that's when people start coming closer again. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence finally feels safe. Safe to be seen. Safe to be imperfect. Safe to be real. Closing. Your past still speaks. But now you get to choose how. Will it speak through fear or through healing? Will it repeat or release? Will it build walls or open doors? It's not too late to change a story, and the next chapter can begin with you. If this message made something stir in you, if you felt seen or understood or less alone, then don't let it be the last time we connect. Subscribe to this channel. Not for noise, not for algorithms, but for quiet, honest conversations like this one. We're building something here. A space where real stories live, where silence is honored, and where healing has room to breathe. And if you know someone else who carries quiet wounds, share this message with them, because healing doesn't always come from fixing the past. Sometimes it begins with simply being understood.